It's the springtime. I love spring and everything is flourishing right now. A lot of wild edible plants in the area, and I am going to be walking around just doing a little bit of plant ID for you. Edible plants, medicinal plants, just a short video. I've got a couple hours of daylight left, maybe a little less, so let's see how many I can squeeze in before we lose sunlight. This is just a little video to spark your interest in some edible plants, give you a little bit of helpful information, but I do not go into extreme depth, and it is very difficult to teach anything about plants when you're not actually in the field looking, touching, smelling, the plant. This is meant to be taken with a grain of salt, and I would encourage you all to go and then research the plants that I'm talking about. Get good plant identification books, go out into the field, locate them. Don't do anything silly like just eating a plant to see if it's edible or not. You want to be able to positively identify it. This is the wild strawberry. The leaves grow in 3, and you'll see that the stalk is rather hairy and quite soft to the touch. They tend to not like too much sun nor too much moisture, but they will mostly be in shaded areas. The strawberries are very delicious to eat, a lot smaller than the farm strawberries that you'll be used to. However, they don't seem to have a very long season, I have noticed when I've been in the wild. So when you do find them, take advantage, which is usually around early summer. In the springtime, you can harvest the uncurled fiddlehead from the bracken leaf, or otherwise known as the fern leaf. This has a nutty-like flavor, very delicious, can usually be found in big patches. You will not find this usually in direct sunlight. It'll typically be on the shaded sides of hills. Some research has been done indicating that these fiddleheads do have a carcinogen. I cannot speak much to that. I choose to eat them, but I would recommend you do your research before you go ahead and eat large quantities. In small quantities, you probably will never have any issue. This right here is stinging nettle. Nettle is one of my favorite. It grows all around the world, prefers moist environments, riparian areas, and moist soil in open fields, especially like this meadow I'm in right now. Meadow is a great area to go look for plants, not just riparian areas. The stinging nettle is such a great food source because it's so high in protein for a plant. It's not that easy to work with because it does have formic acid, from what I understand, inside little hairs on the plant, so it is irritating to your skin when you touch it. Now, I don't find it to be that bothersome to where I won't harvest it. Some people get really bothered by it. You can neutralize the acids by boiling the plant. It is most enjoyable eaten when it's boiled like spinach. However, there is a way to eat this in its raw form in a pinch in a survival situation. So that's the leaf right there. You can see the serrated edges, teardrop shape. It's also got kind of a bit of a soft, fuzzy feel to it. The nettle is absolutely fantastic and quite easy to identify. They tend to grow in really big clusters. And I prefer the leaves when they're young. They tend to get a little bit rubbery and slightly more on the bitter side as they get older and larger, but I still eat them. So if you take the leaf and you scrunch it up in a little ball, now I don't find that I get bothered at all when I'm using the palm of my hand because it's pretty calloused. But if I brush the leaf, or in particular the stem, up against a softer part of my body, then I do find that I do get the sting. So what I'm doing is mashing it up, okay, and I'm mashing it up into a ball until I see all the juices come out of the leaf. Once I see that, okay, then you can eat it. You can eat it without getting any of the irritation from the sting. It's not ideal, and it's definitely tastier when cooked, but as I said, in a pinch, that's the way to eat it. Now there's so many medicinal properties to this. One of the big ones is allergy relief. It was used for things like asthma and that, to stimulate breast milk production in women. And when I say that, I'm talking about the natives, the way that they used to use the plant. So this one is great. I've eaten a lot of this in the wild, and if you had one plant to rely on for food source, this would be a good one. As I mentioned, they grow in really big clusters, so you can actually harvest a lot of leaves and get quite a substantial meal out of them. And I've always been quite surprised at how I'll eat a bowl full of nettle, and for some reason I'll be full, which is, for me, I need to eat a lot of salad in order to be full, but there's something quite special about these plants. Another cool little fun fact about stinging nettle is the stem can actually produce some tinder. So here's a big patch of stinging nettle right here. And what I'm looking for is the dead stem, and that would be these guys right here. So I'm going to pull a couple of these out here. They've got to be dead, they've got to be grey, they've got to be dry. I'll pull a couple of them out and I'll show you what we do with that. So I've got a few dead stems right here. What I'm going to do, just break them up in my hand. I want to hear that crack. Remember, anything that you want to use for fire making when it comes to kindling, you want it to have that cracking sound, because that's the indicator that it's dry. So I'm going to mash this up in my hand, and the reason I'm doing that is to break up the sort of bark, if you will, in the stem, because I want to expose the fibers on the inside. Native Americans used to use these fibers to make natural cordage out of, and I haven't found it to be that great for cordage, as it's pretty tedious. And here in the southwestern part of the States, you have yucca quite readily available, which is such a superior plant when it comes to cordage making that I tend to use that primarily. So I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but as you can see, there's a whole lot of fibers in there. And these fibers make pretty good tinder. You just keep on mashing this up, you'll start getting rid of all the woody parts, and we'll just get down to that cotton wool, cotton bud type of material. And I have left the woody parts, provided they're dry, I have left them in with the tinder, and it doesn't really affect the ability to get a fire started with this. But it's just obviously you would want more of that sort of cotton fluffy like texture for a tinder ball. So as I said, I'm not going to go crazy, but there you've got a lovely bunch of tinder. Just throw your spark right in there, put your bow draw ember in there, and you're good to go. This next plant is called Elderberry. It has leaves that grow opposite each other with very fine saw-toothed edges. It's important to know that the leaves, bark, roots, and unripe berries of the elderberry cause cyanide poisoning and should be avoided. The berries and the flowers are edible, however should be cooked before eating. It's known more for its medicinal properties than its actual edible properties, and will treat things like cough, bronchitis, fevers, and colds, even infections. It's important to finish this by mentioning that no berry should ever be eaten in a survival situation that you cannot positively identify, especially berries that are white in color. Mustard leaves are a great score for a survivalist. These leaves are very high in protein and usually grow in very large patches, so you can certainly eat your fill of these plants. They usually grow throughout spring and summer too, which gives you a much longer window to harvest them. You can identify this plant by the 4-petaled yellow flowers which grow out from the base of the Rosetta Formation. It has a lovely spicy flavor and can be eaten raw or cooked. Willow is a great medicinal plant. The inner bark on the willow tree contains salicylic acid, which was the sort of compound that aspirin was designed to mimic. So the salicylic acid inside of the cambium, or the inner bark layer, is going to be the greatest. So you want to shave off pieces of the bark and you can just simply chew it, or you can make it into a tea to relieve fever and headaches. Willow leaves are very long and narrow, and you'll almost always find willows growing in moist areas. There's some stagnant water down here. Now, willow does not need to grow where there is water above the surface. The water table can be down fairly deep for willow, but it is a good indicator that there is water nearby, and I have used this as an indication in the desert to help me locate and dig for water. Miner's lettuce is easy to identify with its cup-shaped leaves and the flower that protrudes right out of the middle. It's usually found in moist canyons and has a pleasant, mild taste. This is thistle. All parts of this plant are edible, particularly the roots, which can be cooked or eaten raw. The leaves are a little hard to handle because of all the thorns on them, so typically I'll cut the leaves back to get to the stalk. The stalk is delicious and can be eaten raw or cooked. The roots of this plant are amazing for the liver, and as far as my knowledge goes, I do not know of any thistles that cannot be eaten. That noise is music to my ears. I encourage anyone who's watching this video to just get outdoors and sit down and just listen to the sounds of nature. Frogs, birds, even just wind blowing through the trees. It's very therapeutic, and it helps you connect. And the connection is what it's all about. The more that we can feel at home in the outdoors, as opposed to feeling like a foreigner, the better we're all going to be, and the better this planet's going to be.